This is Kevin Harrington, original shark from Shark Tank, inventor of the infomercial, and you're listening to Jamy Bechler from Success is a Choice.
Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Welcome to Success is a Choice podcast. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler, and today we have a very special guest. We have Grant Baldwin joining us today. And if you've ever heard me speak or worked with me to set up a speaking event, then you should either be thanking Grant or blaming Grant. He has had a huge impact on everything that I've done as a speaker. Grant is a nationally known speaker and podcast host. As a speaker, Grant has given speeches to over hundreds of thousands of people throughout his career. He's also at the top of his game when it comes to training speakers. His speaking workshops are unmatched. We are very excited to have Grant joining us today. So please give him a warm welcome. Clap it up in your car or on your stationary bike, wherever you're listening to this podcast. So give it up for Grant Baldwin as we welcome him to the main stage.
Appreciate you letting me hang out with you, man.
Hey, no problem. No problem. Give us a little bit of background. You know, you're a speaker. You speak to lots and lots of people, and you also do training and podcasting, but give us a little background, fill in the holes.
Yeah, so long story short, I used to be a youth pastor. I went to Bible college and then became a youth pastor, and then after that, I had some opportunities to speak, obviously in the church world, and felt like I was decent at it. And so after I kind of left that role, then met a couple guys who were speaking full time and were doing, you know, basically like a full time professional speaker. And for a while, like I don't know that I didn't realize like that was a thing, you know, that you could do. I just didn't see that on the menu. And so then started feeling like I want to do that. That looks fun. That looks appealing. And so built a business as a speaker and did that for the next about 8-9 years or so, and did anywhere from 50 to 70 gigs a year. Did a lot in the education space with high schools, colleges, a lot of leadership conferences, a lot with parents and teachers. And so a couple of years ago, got to a point where was really enjoying speaking, and speaking is a lot of fun, but one of the challenges with speaking is it doesn't scale very well. So you are one person in one place at one time talking to one audience, and so you can only speak to that audience. And the other downside is that it's a very high-paying manual labor job, meaning that I would get paid way too well to stand on the stage and run my mouth, but the nature of speaking is that I'd have to get on a plane, I'd have to leave my family. So got to a point where it's like, all right, I want to, I'd love to continue speaking, but I'd love to do something else that doesn't depend on me having to get on a plane all the time. So I had started to see kind of the online business landscape and people doing podcasts and courses and trainings and just some other types of options there. And at the time I was having a lot of people who were asking me about speaking and saying, hey, I want to become a speaker. And maybe for them, they wanted to do, 50, 60, 70 gigs a year, or maybe they wanted to do 5 and they just had no idea. Yeah, but how do I actually book a gig? And so we started an online training course about that concept of how do you actually find and book speaking engagements. And that continued to take off and still kind of the main flagship thing of what we offer today. So as my speaking or as the training business really took off, then I was kind of decreasing the number of speaking gigs I was personally doing. And we do a lot more on the training side now and helping others on their businesses and helping them understand how to find and book gigs and build a system and build a business around speaking. So yeah, that's the bulk of what we do today.
So you're a youth pastor and you're speaking to a lot of kids. When did you move from speaking to your own kids as a youth pastor to going out and speaking to other people? And then when did you get paid for that, to do that for the first time? You got paid by somebody else?
Yeah, so I made the transition pretty quick early on. In college, I actually worked for a guy who was a full-time speaker. He did a lot in the church world, and so he was doing a lot of camps and retreats and weekend services. And so I saw that as a somewhat of the thing, but part of the limitation there was in the church market, it's can be notorious for having lower budgets, and it can be a little bit harder to make work financially. And so I was interested in speaking, but I didn't necessarily want to do it in the way that I'd seen what worked for him. And so I was at the church for about a year and a half or so before I left that. And in fact, when I left that, it wasn't necessarily like, all right, I want to go from here and to be a speaker, and now I'm going to pursue that dream. For a little while, it was I felt like I had a bit of a quarter life crisis of going, okay, this youth pastor gig's okay. I'm not sure it's what I want to do with the rest of my life, and I'm not really sure what I would rather be doing with the rest of my life. And so that's when I started I spent several months just kind of figuring out, all right, what do you want to be now? What do you want to do now when you grow up? And that's when I started, like, speaking was a thing that continued to pop back up on my radar. And so I think one thing that was really beneficial and helpful for me early on that I think is helpful for anybody in any type of role, depending on what you're pursuing, is to find someone who's doing something similar to what you want to do and see what early steps that they took to get to that point. Now, I say find someone that's doing something similar and doing it in a way that you want to do it. Meaning, if for me, I said, okay, let's say I want to be a speaker. Let's see, who else is a speaker? Tony Robbins is a speaker. John Maxwell is a speaker. So, okay, they did it, so I can do it. Well, they're kind of playing at a different level, you know. So trying to find people that were a couple years ahead of me, who were 3-4 years ahead of me, who were having some level of success. And it just gave me the, at least made it feel like, okay, these guys aren't like light years ahead of me and playing this totally different league. They're just a couple years ahead. Here's some things that they've done that have worked. Here's some of the types of events that they're speaking at. Here's some of the topics that they're speaking on. Here's how they're getting booked. And let's see if we can do something similar. And so that's a lot of what it was early on for me, was just paying attention to other people and seeing what was working for them. In fact, that's something I've continued to do in my business, is not from like a copycat or a mimicking standpoint, but really just saying, okay, here's the general strategy of what's working. How do we do something similar? So that's what it was early on for me, and I started to book some speaking engagements and kind of figured out what worked, and how do you book more engagements, and how do you figure out how much to charge, and what do you speak on, and how do you negotiate and travel and logistics and contracts, and all that just goes into it. And so for several years then, it was a lot of learning the business and figuring out what works, and going from just me to building a small team that helped run the business. And that's when we started to transition into doing more of the training stuff that we do today.
Was there an aha moment at some point where you knew you wanted to be in this, and you knew this was your future, but was there an aha moment where it was like, man, I'm really good at this?
Yeah, in fact, one of the first like paid gigs that I did, like I would say, like, I'd done a lot of speaking in the church world, and I'd got good feedback, and I think it's very important for anybody just to be self-aware, to feel like, is there something here? I didn't feel like, I still to this day don't feel like I'm the greatest speaker in the world by any means. I feel like I'm very good at what I do, and felt like I had the potential to be, a very solid speaker. And so, So I think like one of the big moments and catalysts for me was when I first decided, okay, I'm going to be a speaker. I'm going to do this thing. Let's try to start booking some gigs. And the very first thing I booked on my own, and I went and I spoke at this, it was this Missouri 4-H event for a group of high school students. And there was about 300 people there. And so I went and I spoke for about 45 minutes. They paid me $1,000, which was just completely mind-boggling to me. And I vividly remember like the talk went extremely well. And I just remember just feeling like on this high, like this worked. They laughed at the jokes and they got the points and everything. It just clicked, And I remember them handing me the check, and I remember going out to my car. And I remember getting in the car, and I remember just like breaking down into tears, just feeling like, that was amazing. This is it. Like, I want to keep doing this. And so it was just that was definitely an aha moment for me, where I felt like I'd found something I wanted to do for the next few years.
So on the flip side, when was a time where the wheels kind of fell off the wagon, or all the fears that everybody has about public speaking kind of came true for you?
Yeah, I know. I think there's the misconception that professional speakers, they never have bad days or they never have bad audiences, and that's just not true. I mean, I've certainly had my fair share of frustrating moments as a speaker where, the audience just didn't laugh, or they're not, they're out of it, or I'm off my game, or I wasn't as prepared as I should have been, or there's mic issues or tech issues or things that are outside of your control. And so sometimes it's the things that happen like as a speaker on stage, and then there's the side of it that speakers talk about and acknowledge, but no one really wants to think about is like the non-glamorous side of, getting on a plane and leaving your family. And oftentimes people think, well, you get to travel, you get to go to all these places. But I mean, the reality is like, again, I'm leaving my family, which I don't want to do, but also like dealing with, sleeping in another hotel, and some hotels are really nice and some aren't so much. And, or being on missing a flight, or delays and connections and weather, and like just all these things. I've had a couple moments where I remember flight got canceled. I was on this flight headed to, or supposed to be on this flight headed to, I think it was Indianapolis to speak, and the flight got canceled, and ended up having to like just drive through the night and show up the next morning exhausted, but then show up and speak. And it's days like that where you're just like, this is the glamorous part that nobody sees. Like, this sucks, but like it's part of it. And that happens, it doesn't happen often, but it happens. So yeah, there's certainly like the glamorous parts of, you're standing on stage in front of thousands of people and you kill it and you get a standing ovation and you spend, a couple hours signing autographs and taking pictures. But then there's also days you're just like, what the heck am I doing? Like, this is not working. I suck at this. So I think that's the case with any speaker.
Well, I love that example you gave where you didn't just call them up and tell them that, hey, I can't come because the plane, I missed my flight or whatever with the airlines. You still drove through the night, so you found a way to get it done.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I tell speakers all the time is you never miss an event. And if you committed to be there, now if there's going to be some things that are completely outside of your control. You cannot control the weather. You cannot control flights. You cannot control some of those things. But you need to know, and you need to be totally honest with the client. Know that you did everything you possibly could to get to the event. I remember early on I was helping another speaker and just kind of coaching and mentoring him, and he called me and he said, hey, dude, I'm supposed to be at this event tomorrow and all the flights are canceled and yada, yada, what am I supposed to do? And I said, how far is the drive? And he said it was, like 8-9 hours or something. And I said, you better start driving. And he goes, are you serious? I said, I'm dead serious. You have to be there. You do not miss. And I think that's just a good principle just in general is you made a commitment. You got to do whatever you can to honor that. I remember a time where I was flying from Denver to Chicago to speak at a gig, and the gig was a couple hours outside of Chicago, and there's a big snowstorm in Denver and just major weather issues. And so we were on the runway, just delayed. And so by the time we land in Chicago, I drive a couple hours. So it's basically like I pull into the parking lot of this place, of this venue to speak, and I remember brushing my teeth in the parking lot, just spitting into in the parking lot there, just like, this is ridiculous, but like this, you have to be at the event, if at all possible. If you exhausted every other option, then you need to be at that event and definitely not miss.
Well, you travel around a lot. Are there any states that you've never been to?
There's only 2 that I haven't visited. There's 5 that I haven't spoken. So I've been to 48 and spoken 45 if you're keeping score at home. But the 2 I haven't visited, the obvious one that people, or at least would understand, would be Maine. Somehow I haven't made it up there. But then the random one is South Carolina. I've done a lot of gigs around there. And even now I live in Nashville, which is a driving distance to South Carolina. So I always joke about we need to just hop in the car and go knock it out one day. Figure I'll get to them at some point. My family and I, we place a high priority on travel and trips and experiences. And so the running joke is we're on a trip, already planning the next trip, and so we're pretty notorious for that. So yeah, I figure we'll get there one of these days, and so I'm not too concerned about it.
Well, nearly everybody listening to this podcast has either spoken in public or will be speaking in public. Maybe not as a professional speaker like you, but they'll be speaking in public at some point, and it's a fear of most people. The old Jerry Seinfeld, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy at a funeral.
Right.
What do you have any advice for somebody that's going to be speaking in public, maybe not professionally, but just in general?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that you can do is to really spend some time preparing. I think that, again, this is kind of a misconception that the best speakers in the world, the best speakers that you've ever seen, even take the analogy of comedians, that they're just naturally funny, that they just get up and wing it, and they just come up with some stuff off the top of their head, and it just happens to all flow together, and the audience loves it. Like, I promise you, it does not work like that. That they have spent, the best speakers, the best comedians, they have spent hours and hours and hours and hours practicing their material, going over their material, trying their material, and spending a lot of time just going through it time and time and time again. That makes them great. I'll give you a quick analogy. This is actually, I'm stealing a story from a guy I just interviewed on our podcast, and this guy used to his name's Alan Stein. He used to do a lot of like basketball coaching from like a strength conditioning standpoint. And Jamy, I know you come from the basketball world, so you'll appreciate this. But he got connected with several NBA players and was doing some coaching for USA basketball for Olympics and I guess some of the international competitions. And so traveled all over the world. And so he had the opportunity. We were kind of wrapping up this interview, and I said, all right, I want you to tell me a good story about basketball and from your NBA days and coaching days. And so he said, and I think it was like 2006, 2008, he had the opportunity to attend a practice, like just a private practice with Kobe Bryant. And so it was Kobe and, one of his strength and conditioning coaches. And he's spending just hours and hours and hours there at the gym. It was like 3:30, 4 in the morning, just going over the most basic stuff, the most basic footwork, the most basic ball handling, the most basic passing, and just the basic fundamentals, and spent so much time going over it. And he said he asked Kobe after the practice there, he said, "You're the greatest player in the world. Like, why are you spending so much time going through these basics?" And And Kobe responded something to the effect of, why do you think I'm one of the greatest players in the world? Because he spends so much time practicing. And people think like, well, a Kobe Bryant, a LeBron James, or whoever, they just go out on the basketball court and they just wing it and they just play and they're just naturally athletically talented. And yeah, there's some natural athleticism to it, but at the same time, they spend so much time behind the scenes practicing and working on their craft, and that's what makes them good. Now, so that doesn't necessarily mean that, you got to give a 15-minute presentation at work, therefore you need to spend, 50 hours on it, practicing and going over it time and time and time again, but you shouldn't expect to just get up and wing it and expect that you have great results. So spend a lot of time going over that talk, not necessarily memorizing like a script, but I think what's really important is that you really know the essence of the talk, and so that's something that you can share without anything that comes up or anything that happens in the room that may fluster you. It's not throwing you off. You're not forgetting, oh crap, what's my line? You're not memorizing a script. You're sharing a talk. You're sharing a presentation. And so I think again that the biggest thing that you can do that will make a huge difference is to spend a lot of time practicing and preparing.
Should you try to cut jokes, try to be humorous, try to do things like that to be an entertainer?
You can't. I think a lot of it depends on the person. I think there's, again, kind of a misconception of like, in order to be a great speaker, you have to be funny. And yeah, a lot of great speakers are funny. But if you're someone who's like, if I'm in a social environment and I'm not funny, then all of a sudden I shouldn't think that I'm going to be hilarious in front of a group giving a presentation I've never done before. And so a lot of times whenever you're using humor, and this is the same thing that's true with comedians, is they're making an educated guess on what's funny and how the audience is going to react. And so if you are someone that's naturally funny, then yeah, you could probably incorporate humor and jokes into your talk. But if you're not, you shouldn't feel that pressure. Another thing that I would mention to you is that for people who feel like, all right, I'm not funny, but I'd love to use humor, what do I do? One simple way to do that is you can actually use slides really well and really effectively. I'm generally not a fan of slides. We can get into that if you want, but for people who want to use them, or you're given some type of presentation that necessitates slides, sometimes we feel like, oh, okay, I got to be funny, I got to tell a joke. Well, maybe the best thing you could do is actually just, you can show a funny picture or show a funny meme or GIF, or show a quick video or something that is not necessarily you telling a joke, but you just showing something funny that connects with what you're talking about. And that's the punchline. That's the joke. And so people connect the dots that, oh, you're funny. But in reality, it's just you showing a picture of something that happened to be funny.
Talking about that, because a lot of people do use slides or they use PowerPoint when they present, maybe not professional speakers, but just when they have an event that they have to go to, a presentation. What are a couple things that you would warn against, that you would caution against when using slides? Yeah,
my biggest annoyance with slides, and slides can be extremely powerful. They can be extremely effective. A picture is worth 1,000 words, or whatever the saying is, and that can be very true. I think about friends of mine who have powerful stories of they were in some crazy car wreck, or they climbed Mount Everest, or some crazy life experience. It's one thing for them to talk about. It's another thing for them to show a picture of that, of here's the car wreck that I survived, and look at the picture of the car. They can describe it, but showing a picture is incredibly more effective and powerful. The thing that I don't like about slides is oftentimes speakers can get way more caught up with their slides than with the talk. And so one of the things I always say is that your slides should be an enhancement, not a replacement for your presentation. And I think we've all seen this with speakers who they spend so much time like working on their slides, analyzing their slides, wanting to make sure their slides look good, reading off of their slides, using their slides as cue cards for their entire talk. And the slides basically takes the place of the presentation. So a good way to think about this is if you're getting ready to give a presentation with slides and 5 minutes before you're supposed to speak, the slides don't work or the technology breaks down, you should still be able to give the talk, and the talk needs to stand alone and stand on its own, meaning that if you're, this happened a couple months ago, my wife was attending a conference and she texted me and she said, hey, the session that I'm sitting in was supposed to start 15 minutes ago, but the speaker insisted they couldn't start because the slides wouldn't work. Then you're not ready. Like, you shouldn't give that presentation. You shouldn't be up there in the first place. You should be able to say, oh, crud, my slides didn't work, but I'm good to go. The talk is still ready and the talk is still strong. But I've seen this a lot of times with speakers. They spend so much time worried about the slides, and they do that at the detriment of the presentation. If you're just going to show slides, then just show a slideshow, show a video, and sit down. Like, there's no need for you to be talking if you're just going to be reading off the slides. So the slides should be an enhancement. They shouldn't be a replacement for your talk.
We'll return to the interview with Grant Baldwin shortly, but I wanted to take a moment to thank today's show sponsor, HostGator.com. They might not have cool commercials like GoDaddy.com or Danica Patrick advertising for them, but what they are is inexpensive and easy to use, which is really what I care about. I am definitely a rookie when it comes to websites, and they were very helpful. I use them for all my websites. If you want to make a website or even get a new one, then I recommend HostGator.com. Use promo code SUCCESS and you'll get up to 50% off the retail price. Cheap and easy. That's how I like my websites. Use promo code SUCCESS at HostGator.com. And now back to our interview with Grant Baldwin. There's probably some people in our audience that are thinking about they want to get into the business of speaking and getting paid for it. Maybe like Alan Stein. Alan Stein was on episode 3 of Success is a Choice podcast. And, he went from, like you mentioned, he went from being more of a basketball coach, more of a trainer, to now he's a professional speaker. And so if someone wants to get into the speaking business, what kind of advice would you have? Certainly your training programs are something you want to mention, but what advice would you have for those people?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of speakers make is they have done a few speaking engagements and something that they're intrigued in, something that they enjoy doing, they want to do more of it, and they just say, hey, I just want to speak. And so who do you speak to? I'll speak to anybody. Okay, what do you speak about? What do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. And the reality is like that just doesn't work. That's not effective at all. And so it feels very counterintuitive, but you want to be as narrow and specific as possible. Because the more vague and broad you are, the more you're just you appeal to everybody and nobody at the same time. But you really want to be specific in who you're speaking to and what you're speaking about. And so again, people feel like, well, doesn't that limit my options? Actually, no, because people then feel like this is made for us. This is the ideal speaker that we need. I'll give you an example. So let's say, for example, you want to, if you needed, some type of like specialty foot surgery, all right? Are you going to go to the guy who's like, this is all he does, is he does foot surgery for like this very specific type of injury, and this is his bread and butter? Or are you going to go to the guy who's kind of a general doctor and he's going, yeah, I took a class on surgery one time. It's been a few years since I've done it. I've never really done much with foot stuff, but yeah, I guess I could do that. Like, nobody wants to go to that guy to let him cut open your foot. Like, you want to go to the person. And so the exact same thing is true for speakers. If you're saying, yeah, I could speak on, leadership and motivation and customer service and sales and teamwork and culture and all these different topics, and you're like, I speak to anybody and everybody. I speak to churches, and I speak to moms and dads, and I speak to business owners, and I speak to real estate agents, and you're just like, you can't do all of those things effectively. So if you're able to say, no, all I do is I help educators in the classroom, high school teachers, become better teachers and educators in the classroom, and that's all I do. Like, it makes it a lot easier for people to self-select and be like, that's exactly what we need. That's perfect. You're what we need, because here's this other person over here who that's one of 15 things that they think that they can offer. No, but this is the thing that you offer, and therefore clients are going to be a lot more likely to work with you. So for any type of speaker who's getting started or at any stage of the career, I think the more specific you can be about who you speak to, and ultimately not just what you speak about, but what's the problem that you can solve for that audience, the easier it'll be for you to get started and to start to make some traction.
Talk about your speaker programs. You even have a free workshop as well.
Yeah, so we have a lot of free resources over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. So we got a free podcast over there. I got, I think, over 150 episodes at this point, all different subjects and topics in the speaking industry. We also have a free workshop people can check out over at freespeakerworkshop.com, freespeakerworkshop.com. So we've kind of just scratched the surface here on what you need to think about, what you need to know from a speaking business perspective. But there's definitely a lot more of a step-by-step system there that people can totally check out at freespeakerworkshop.com.
And we'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can check that out. And I definitely recommend the podcast very, very highly. Your podcast, if you only had one episode left to do, you were ending it after one episode. Is there somebody that who would you want to be your last podcast, or the person to be on that last podcast?
That's a good question. That's good. I'll tell you one of my, I don't know off the top of my head. I'll tell you one of my favorite episodes was actually the episode I did with my wife. I think it's I want to say episode 60. And I think that this is, I think especially for people who are getting into speaking and want to do it on a full-time basis, I think this would be a good episode for you to listen to or have your spouse listen to. But my wife is definitely, she's more quiet, introverted, shy. And so it was a really fun episode for us just to talk about like when I was building the speaking business and whenever we had kids and just like navigating that as, as a family, as a couple, and figuring some of that stuff out. So, yeah, I'm a little biased, but that'd definitely be one of my favorite episodes.
And that would be a good one for your last one, to bring your wife back for an encore performance.
Sure, for sure. I'm always thinking about, how do I get her back on? So it was a miracle that I could get her on for one. So going for two might be pushing my luck, but I'll give it a shot.
Well, that is the only Grant Baldwin episode my wife has listened to. I made her.
There you go. That's awesome.
But Grant, appreciate you coming on the show today. Definitely we'll put those other things in the show notes. Where else can people connect with you? Are you on social media? A website?
Yeah. Most of our stuff is just at Grant Baldwin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those different places. So just Google search Grant Baldwin or the main stuff, especially for those interested in speaking, is definitely check out thespeakerlab.com.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate your insights. Great stuff, because so many people listening will have to speak in public at some point. Maybe not get paid for it, but they'll have to speak. So definitely recommend the resources there at thespeakerlab.com and grantbaldwin.com. So Grant, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it, man.
Awesome stuff today from Grant Baldwin. If you want to give better presentations or if you want to do some paid speaking gigs, then you definitely need to check out Grant's stuff at thespeakerlab.com. If you like this episode, please do us a big favor and give it a quick little 5-star review on iTunes. It's quick and it's painless and helps others find the podcast. Thanks again, and until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?